Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for this Achates live session on Thursday, 13th of November. Today, as we look back on Trustee Week 2025, we're going to be talking about the relationship between trustees and development teams and hearing from three brilliant panellists who together bring extensive experience of trusteeships in the cultural sector, as well as, in one case, experience of executive leadership of a cultural organisation. My name's Phoebe Walker, and I'm a senior consultant at Achates. I'm joined today by my lovely colleague Ruth Davey. Ruth is Achates' Deputy Director of Income Generation. Achates is a consultancy providing support to cultural organisations with fundraising, recruitment strategy, organisational change planning, and impact evaluation. We take our name from Greek and Roman mythology. Achates was the close friend and loyal advisor to Aeneas, so we think our name quite neatly describes the relationship that we offer to clients within the cultural sector. Achates Live was set up to really support the sector, bringing fundraisers and other arts professionals together to discuss key topics and also to enable you to help and support each other. And whilst we obviously acknowledge that Achates doesn't necessarily have all the answers, what we absolutely do have is an overview of the sector itself, and we're incredibly passionate about using this perspective and role in a supportive way. It's worth saying that all of the information shared in today's conversation is correct at the time of broadcast. And today's session, as I mentioned, will focus on trustee relationships. Ruth is going to chair a discussion with our wonderful panellists, and I'm delighted to now hand you over to her to welcome our guests who'll be exploring this topic with us today. So, Ruth.
Thank you, Phoebe. And welcome, everybody. First, a few things to point out about the role of trustees. Charity trustees have independent control over and legal responsibility for a charity's management and administration. Their role and legal responsibilities include ensuring that the charity is carrying out its purposes for the public benefit, managing the charity's resources responsibly, and ensuring that the charity is accountable. While trustees aren't, or shouldn't be, involved in the day-to-day running of an organisation, a board does have ultimate responsibility for its performance, and its role is to promote effective decision-making, strengthen relationships with stakeholders and supporters, and support the fulfilment of the organisation's strategic goals. When it comes to fundraising, we all know that this is a whole organisation endeavour. And the board's understanding of this and their role in supporting fundraising is key to the overall responsibility for ensuring the charity does its best for those it exists to support. Successful fundraising is about delivering on your objectives and ensuring sustainability, two areas that any trustee should absolutely be concerned with. Fundraising requires a more active role in delivery than any other aspect of the organisation for the board, including key, nuanced support in areas such as advocacy and relationship building. This means that effective and collaborative relationships between trustees, key members of your development team and senior leadership are absolutely crucial. And today we're going to explore how trustees and development teams can most effectively work together in fundraising contexts to support an organisation's strategic objectives. So now I want to turn to our three brilliant panellists for their take on this very meaty topic. So first, some introductions. We're delighted to be joined today by Keerthi Golamada, Sarah Hall and Alison Robinson. Keerthi is both the CEO of the National Student Drama Festival and the Finance Director at Headlong Theatre. She is also a freelance consultant for artistic organisations with a love for volunteering. Keerthi is a trustee at the Bush Theatre and Judith Dimont Productions, and she volunteers in mental health. And she's also a writer. Sarah has over 17 years' experience as a charity trustee across various arts and other organisations. She helped found and was the chair of the first Young Vic Development Committee established after the theatre was rebuilt. She's a trustee of and the Finance Committee chair at Opera North and also at Landmark Trust. Sarah is the chair of New Perspectives, an Arts Council MPO touring theatre company based in Nottingham, and the chair of Discerning Eye, a visual arts charity, as well as being a trustee at Aurora Wellbeing and Southwell Music Festival. Alison is a partner at the executive search firm Hydrick & Struggles, where she leads the firm's work in consumer tech, entertainment and media. She sat on arts boards for over 15 years, including the Royal Academy of Dance and the Cultural Philanthropy Foundation. She's currently chair of the Javed Allen Poor Company, a trustee for the Women's Prize for Fiction and Non-Fiction, and the development chair for the Almeida Theatre. Welcome, everybody. Those are very impressive CVs. Keerthi, I'll come to you first. could you share a little bit of information about your joint experience as both a trustee and as a CEO of a cultural organisation?
Sure. Hi, Ruth. Hi, everyone. Um, I think being not only a leader, but working in organizations where I had to report to boards for a long time gave me some useful insight that I think maybe a lot of people don't get, and that maybe the trustee role seems a bit more mysterious unless you have a bit of the inside track. But I think that sort of gave me the reassurance that I knew not only what I did want, but what I didn't want in a board or an organization, and how I would like to spend my time, and the kind of organization I would like to give that time to was really important to me. I think there's no point doing it with an organization you don't sort of get something out of as well and feel really passionate about or interested in or love the people you work. So it's been quite symbiotic, really. And I think therefore now as a trustee, I have more empathy towards the team who's reporting to me, and I have a better understanding of what it is they're dealing with on the ground.
Thank you. Alison, you're on both boards and development committees. Could you share a little information on that experience?
Yeah, the I think actually having a perspective on both is really useful. If you're sitting on an arts board, development is should be part of what you're thinking about, even if you're not on the development committee. And I do think that lots of, I shouldn't say lots, but I think some trustees think that it is not their job because the development committee is there. And actually, it's all of our jobs. And wearing both those hats of chairing a development committee and sitting on boards where I'm not on the development committee is quite interesting because I can see those two different roles, but also the responsibilities that everyone on the board has.
Absolutely. And Sarah, tell us a little bit about your really broad experience as a trustee and development committee member.
Well, again, I would entirely echo what Alison's just said. Alice has just said, because I think the thing for me is that as finance chair of lots of places, we look at what the development team is bringing in and we provide a lot of sort of help to them. And one of the things that I've always found quite interesting is how does a development team report to a development board and to the main board, often via, say, finance and general purposes. But for me, I've always been a passionate believer that every trustee is an advocate for and a potential fundraiser for the organisation. Whatever your particular strength is, that's what you sign up. You sign up for a general trustee role. You don't sign up to be the trustee that leads on X or Y. You may end up with that as a sort of another thing to occupy you, but that's not what you sign up for. So for me, I think there's quite a symbiosis again between the role of the audit finance committee and the development committee, because obviously getting income through the door is critical to getting productions on a stage or output anywhere else, and so for me I think it's totally important. And obviously I've seen development committees take many different forms, from the sort of more traditional black book style, where actually there's only a couple of members of trustees on there or a couple of members of the board on there, and then it's people who can help raise money, through to being much more of an active semi-board committee. And both work well in different times of an organisation's evolution, I think.
So you've hit upon it there a little bit, but all cultural organisations, of course, want a very engaged board, particularly when it comes to fundraising. What do you think that an organisation's internal teams could be doing differently to ensure their trustees remain engaged? Let's start with Sarah.
It's a really good question. I've seen, again, how many ways to skin a cat, how many cats to be skinned, sort of thing. But one of the things that I've found really helped in the theatre company I chair in Nottingham, New Perspectives, which has just celebrated its 50th anniversary. It's the East Midlands Rural Touring Theatre, and there's a West Midlands one, Pentabus. But one of the things that we've done in the last sort of 3 years is tag specific trustees to specific bits of activity of the organisation, so that they attend more of the things that are happening. So to give an example, we have a really good talent development project. That's the bit I go, and I'll go and sit in on their discussions and talk to them. And that's helped me enormously be able to advocate more hopefully more effectively, certainly more knowledgeably about what that bit of the organisation does. And I think that's a really good thing that is not overly difficult for the executive team to deliver, hopefully, that can help. But again, trustees are often incredibly busy people. So it's how do you manage their time as well as you can without wasting the exec team's time, which is something that I sat in as interim ED at the Young Vic for a year in the artistic change between David Lan and Kwame Kwei-Armah. And, I haven't yet come across an arts organisation that doesn't run on hot. So again, how do you manage that time between the trustees' time, the executive team time, and making that a really effective use of everybody's time to gain something from it rather than just be a box ticking exercise?
Alison, you're nodding.
I'm very much nodding at that running on hot. I think so many, obviously we have very large arts organizations too, but so many of our arts organizations are small and mighty. And many of the arts organizations I'm involved with certainly fall in that camp. I would actually start even before what the exec can do to keep the board engaged and say, what's the chair setting out when you're recruiting new board members of the expectation of board members? So at the Women's Prize, where I'm a trustee, there is a very clear ask that we are an organization that has 4 exec team members. And as a board member, we are an active board. And that's a very, very clear ask. And we are all very, very engaged in whatever way, shape, and form that's right for us as individuals. But it's a very, very active lean-in board as almost an extension of the executive. And in the theater company I chair, the Javad Alipur company, I would then use that as an example of how the exec engages board members, because they really open the doors to say, come and be part of the organization to learn more. So we have a community council as an organization, and board members rotate attending that community council as a way to just get closer to not only the work, but also the engagement that's happening with the organization. So I'd encourage organizations to really keep board members close to the activity. But I think it starts with what's the expectation setting for the board members, even before they join.
Kathy, anything that you'd add? How do you like to be engaged?
I think it really depends on the organization, and I think sometimes when recruiting trustees, you may be looking for a certain set of skills, but you're not considering the sort of chemistry fit for the organization. What's that expectation setting, as Alison mentioned, but yeah, what are they hoping to get out of it? Is it just they'd like to sit on the board? How much are they willing to be involved? And also we focus a lot on skills audits, like what skills gap are we trying to plug? But I think it's very important to think about the interests of the trustees and where they can get involved in that element as well, so that passion stays alive. So they might wear a certain hat day to day at work, but they want to be a trustee for an arts organization because they love the arts. So and I think that does speak to what both Sarah and Alison said. And I think from both sides of the coin, it's just really practically concise board papers. I think that is a real skill. I think good governance is a real skill, and that word can be very woolly, but I think it's comes from the chair down, setting exactly what the culture is for the board, and then what the communication pathways are between the two sides, so that it just makes things so much easier. So yeah, those would be the 3 things I think.
Amazing, thank you. So it's understandable that in times of financial pressure, which seems to be regular at the moment, board meetings can be very focused on numbers rather than the art or the audiences that you're working on behalf of. Is that something you've seen in recent years? And what do you think organisations can do to kind of rebalance how that looks in board meetings? Sarah?
Again, actually picking up on a point Alison made, it really depends on the size of the organisation. I sit on one board that's Southall Music Festival that, has an executive team of sort of 2.5 days a week type of activity, gears up for the festival, which is a choral classical music festival, there the trustees are rolling up their sleeves much more and more probably getting actively involved in audience development and everything else than I certainly would be at Opera North or anywhere else. And I think, again, it really depends on the organisation, how involved the board gets in the arts direction. I've never felt I have any right to comment on what they're choosing to put on the stage at any place I have ever been on the board of. That said, were it something that was overtly political that could cause us a problem, say, then maybe there would be a discussion at a board level. But actually, although there's a lot of focus on numbers, actually there's a lot, I think there's been over the last 5 years, a huge focus on strategic thinking on boards, and as well as numbers. But actually, I think how do you market and how do you bring audiences in has become almost one of the more major topics at most board meetings, because again, it's back to income generation.
How about you, Kitty? Is this something that you're seeing more?
Oh, I mean, massively. I obviously I have a finance background, so I'm on those trustee finance committees. But it makes sense. I mean, it's been an interesting few years. And again, that finance focus goes hand in hand with the strategy focus as well, because if you're not doing both, then nothing's going to change. You're going to be stuck there for a long time. But I think a good question would be, who is on your, what you might call your finance committee, your finance and general purposes committee, your F&A? They've got so many different names. Is there an artistic head in there? Because often we just put the people with the finance skill or the legal skill or the fundraising skill in that room, and actually that kind of helps balance that conversation, and you always need more perspectives. And then therefore, when that committee is reporting back to the full board, you can trust there's a finance head in the room. Yes, we've done your due diligence, but we've also been thinking about it more holistically. And, you know, the CEO, the artistic director are usually in those meetings, but it's good for them to have an advocate as well, I think. And there's something else, which is, as Sarah said, you know, it's not our role to get in, like, to dictate the artistic direction of the company, but we are tasked with managing risk. And I think we're in a really interesting time for that right now, because I would say that often the more marginalized voices in art are considered more risky. And I think we have to be really careful about not confusing those two things when we're thinking about the artistic direction of a company or where we're going, and focusing much more on the structural risk that we can prevent, and not, you know, and leading with positivity and excitement, and not fear. Yeah.
Positivity and excitement sounds much better than fear. Alison, could I ask you about fundraising? So as fundraisers, we have the mindset that it's a whole organisational effort, as I said previously. But what we find sometimes with our clients is that trustees don't feel confident in the fundraising narrative and in kind of articulating that. What do you think are the most effective ways to ensure trustees feel confident that they understand that narrative?
I think the narrative is important, and the feeling that they are responsible for fundraising as well. So I almost start with do people feel that that's part of their role as a trustee? And then, do they have the narrative to tell the story? I've found in the past that organizations I've worked with have prepared really excellent narratives, but you also need someone to own it and have their version of the narrative. So I would almost suggest that organizations start with is there a one page of what we do, the impact we have, and different types of impact, so that a trustee can relate to it on a human level and share their own personal story. Because some trustees respond, and some audiences or potential donors respond more to the artistic output. Others respond much more to the, community impact. Others respond to different areas. So I think really being able to put that story into words and then making it personal for people is really important. But I would suggest that finding ways for people to do the small asks first before they do the big asks. is also helpful.
Absolutely. Sarah, what do you think about the fundraising narrative?
I think Alison has been really spot on actually with this, because people respond to different things. You get the sort of corporate donor potentially who their CEO wants to be able to bring loads of guests to something and be part of something that's got stardust sprinkled all over it. Or somebody else actually is massively passionate about the community work that the organisation does, and someone else will be equally passionate about talent development in the industry or whatever. And so I think it's understanding where the organisation touches various things and how best to articulate the impact of each of those things is actually really important. And everybody will obviously have their own form of that narrative, but it has to be based on a core factuality sort of thing. And I think the other area that needs to be really careful is that people don't go off on a tangent and end up fundraising and getting overexcited about something that the organisation then has to actually spend lots more money to achieve. So actually it's just a complete wash through that, yes, we have just raised £200,000 and it's going to cost us 198 to deliver it all, sort of thing. So I think that's always a really critical thing for trustees to be mindful of as well, and the organisation.
Yes, absolutely. Nobody wants that. Kithy, how do you, from kind of both sides, I suppose, feel about making sure trustees have that kind of narrative ownership?
From both sides, I think it's actually one of the most difficult things. It's not to be underestimated. It's something that needs constant care. It's not just your external stakeholders, but keeping your team. I mean, communication really is what it boils down to, no matter who you're dealing with in an organization, when you're leading it or you're reporting up or you're managing up or whatever it is. But taking people with you, that's, I think, a rare gift. And that's what we're almost trying to reverse engineer and teach to everyone, to keep them interested in the mission. And you're doing it on so many different fronts. Yeah, and even when you have a really great story, it still can be so hard. And in this particular climate, as we know, even harder. But I use this phrase too much, but I say, we should all be singing from the same hymn sheet, whether it's your brand voice, whether it's your development goals, whether it's your mission, vision, values. You need that sort of consensus so that you can all be ambassadors for the organization wherever you are in any room, and you can spot an opportunity and you're ready to go. You're not nervous, even if you might be more of an introverted person or not really a big fan on this idea of fundraising or schmoozing. It doesn't matter, because either as a team or as a board, we've prepared you with almost like this to-go pack to take out there into the world. Yeah.
Can I add something, which is I've found that some of the best advocates and cheerleaders are the people who are already donating. So not, yes, board members, but also donors. And donors, because they're already giving and they're so passionate and they have a reason they're giving, like tapping into them and actually communicating almost the same messaging you give your board members, giving it to your donors. So a couple of the organizations I'm involved with, a lot of the comms sort of flows through to the donors as well, so they can advocate on behalf of the organization, and donors come from donors as well.
Yeah, that's such an excellent point. Kithy, you mentioned a to-go pack, and I love that kind of phrasing. And I think knowing that a lot of people who will be watching today are development professionals, what's the kind of, from any of you really, what's the ideal relationship between the development team in these organisations and the trustees, to make sure you know what they expect from you, like we were just saying, that you've got the information that you need, and what do you think from your experience are sometimes some of the biggest pitfalls in that? Anyone can take that. You're all thinking.
Well, I'd just like to make one point, which is often trustees, there's like an unspoken rule that trustees are also supposed to be donors. That's kind of the ideal. And I understand that, but then having, again, from both sides of the coin, but as a trustee, I'm already giving a lot of my time, and that time is worth a lot to me. So, and then, managing the expectations of the different levels in life your trustees may be at, and that sort of thing. Just being really clear as well about that expectation, so that everyone feels good about what they're giving of themselves, whether it's money or time.
I can pitch in. I mean, my experience has been that working with development teams, the more my encouragement would be ask for more, because yes, you might not get it, but if you don't ask, you won't get it. So we have, for the Almeida, we now have a WhatsApp group. The dev team's not actually on it because we don't want people calling and asking for tickets late at night, but we sort of use it as a channel to go, can we help with this as a team? Like, we're trying to get to this company. Who knows someone? And I think we often feel like you can wait for the board, the development committee meetings, but actually so many people on the development committee are really happy to help if you just point them in a direction. So I would almost over ask. And even if you only get 80% of it, it's more than not getting things you don't ask for.
Yeah, that's so important. Sarah, do you think that sometimes development teams are scared to ask when they clearly shouldn't be?
I think that's right. And I think, again, it depends on the maturity of the development team, how long it's been there, their confidence in themselves and their own delivery levels, as it were. And I think, going back to a point Alison made earlier, how the organisation is chaired, how the chair leads things like this makes an enormous difference to how any of the organisational teams interact with the board, I think, actually. It comes from the CEO, artistic director as well. But actually, I think there can sometimes be, particularly if the development team is quite new in its formation, a reluctance on their part sometimes to ask for things. And hopefully that is mitigated a bit through the development committees if they're functioning well. But I think it's about that, having the ability to have an open conversation. Maybe, at the end of, again, where I've seen it work well, end of a board meeting, the development team is invited in to come and meet all the board members. And so that they just know who people are. There's the opportunity to engage over a cup of tea, glass of wine, whatever. And that, I think, helps enormously. Just go, oh, well, actually, I do know X or Y or, so and so. And I think that can help enormously.
Yeah, communication both ways. I suppose, the development team understanding who the trustees are is so important. From a board, when you're sitting in a board meeting, how important is it for you that all of the trustees are on the same page or singing from the same hymn sheet, Kithy, with the direction of the organisation, particularly in times of change? And what happens if they're not, do you think? Alison?
I mean, I'd start with the board is there to support the executive director and artistic director, for instance, in their direction of travel. So presumably for most organizations, the board has appointed a team and support them in their direction of travel. So that would be my starting point. And then if there is, I think that is with the board chair, if there seems to be some misalignment amongst the board about direction of travel, to really understand what's happening and why that is, and make sure that around the board there's positive challenge, but also support for the team. I think that sits with the chair, really.
Interesting. Kithy, anything to add on that?
Just that if you're doing a robust job as chair, we've talked a lot about that chair role and expectation setting or culture setting. I think you will have a group of supportive, well-meaning people in the room who believe in the organisation, who are passionate about it, and yes, support the executive team's vision. That means you've done you've done a good job, and we're not there to be them versus us, and we're not there to prove anything except just there to be helpful, really.
And so have you seen what happens if trustees are not on the same page with this?
Yeah, it's an interesting. I thought quite a lot about this when you sort of posed the question to us ahead of this. I think one of the it's a really interesting thing at the moment going on, because obviously boards are trying to build more and more diversity. And, in a lot of companies and corporate situations at the moment, this cognitive diversity is the one that is the sort of holy grail everybody's seeking. And, I think it can be very healthy to have a robust discussion at a board meeting, but then it needs to be able to be pulled back in and sort of a bit like the cabinet. There needs to be, you've signed up for this, but everybody is a volunteer on a board of an arts organisation, a trustee of an organisation. And, if they really don't like the direction of an organisation, they can always leave. And it's not sort of going to cripple them financially to do so. Will get them a lot of time back and what have you. I have seen it. I've seen it get a bit tricky, not actually in any boards I've been on, but people I've advised at times, where it can get a bit sticky and tricky. But actually, the discussions have probably in the end benefited the organisation enormously because of the robustness of the challenge. But they've not always been particularly easy to manage the way through, and have taken enormous, again, going back to the chair, enormous amounts of good chairing. But I don't know that they necessarily always harmed the organisation long term.
I love that kind of sometimes a kind of forced communication is good. My kind of biggest question for all of you, I guess, is, would you recommend being a trustee to people? And I'd love to know the reason why. Lots of people on here who could lend their skills to boards. Why would you recommend it to them, Alison?
100%. I think you obviously give a lot as a trustee, but you get so much back. And as we've said, you go on a board because you care about what the organization's doing, and you become, you get a window into that organization and the activity, and build relationships in a way that is so rewarding. I find it fascinating that in my exec career, and from a search perspective, I speak to a lot of people who often say to me they would love to get involved with a charity board, because I'm constantly probing, do you want to do something in the arts? And I think they don't know how to access organizations. So often what I say to them is, tell me what you love. What organizations are you naturally drawn to? They probably don't know you. Get to know them and tell them you'd like to do something. Can you volunteer? Can you do something? And there may be a board seat over time. So I think finding ways to also just connect, both as a trustee or a potential trustee with organizations you love. But I hope that organizations know there's a lot of people that love them, that would love to be trustees. And you sort of need to sort of open the door and find them as well.
That's lovely. Sarah, how about you?
Again, I would recommend it incredibly highly. I've got so much out of it. I've learned so much. I've also met fascinating, unbelievably talented people, and often feel like the minnow in the room, because there's such talent and such skill there. And I think there are so many people want to be part of this. We just at the Landmark Trust just did a trustee recruitment where we didn't use an agency. We just put it out to advert for three trustees, and we had nearly 315 applications, I think. As one of the people on the noms committee, that was quite a lot of work, but it was a fascinating cross-section of people who wanted to be involved. And I think that's really healthy for the arts and culture. Obviously, it's a heritage charity, so slightly different, but it's massively great for organisations. However, my counterpoint to that would be, if you're in the Southeast and you're an arts organisation in the Southeast, it is so very much easier to recruit people. Once you get north of about Oxford, and I sit on a board in Nottingham and a board in Leeds, and okay, something like Opera North, it's a sort of national name. But smaller charities really, really struggle to get people and get engaged with people. And if anyone's got any hints on how to do that, or anyone listening to this has a passion for something, go find those organisations and help them out, because they could almost certainly use extra skills, if not this minute, then in the future.
Wow, that 315 applications really proves Alison's point about how many people love their organisation.
15.
350. Amazing. So, Keitha, you obviously work for arts organisations as well as being on the board of several. So does that change your perspective into how and why you would recommend being a trustee?
Does it change my perspective? I mean, it must have. I'm not sure I can tell you how. I do know that it's probably one of my favourite things I do as part of the theatre ecology, and I wear a lot of different hats. I find it immensely satisfying that you get to help support brilliant executive teams. Just be that, it can range really widely from pastoral care to very practical application of your skill set to learning new and exciting things. I mean, I've become much more of a, for want of a better word, a schmoozer by being a trustee, which hadn't really ever been a skill set I would have labeled myself as before. But yeah, it allows me to dabble again in other areas of the arts, not just the ones that I'm restricted to in my day-to-day life. So I really recommend it. I also recommend, just with any opportunity, whether you're applying for a job or you're trying to be a trustee, you want to know that they're as good a fit for you as you are for them. It really is important. So like culturally, is it, if it's like some big imposing board, is that your vibe? Then great. But if you would actually rather muck in, get your hands dirty, and again, some of these regional organizations, smaller organizations can really use excellent people. So just figuring out, what your passion is and applying it. But and I will say this as well, it can be a lot of work. And I think the other thing culturally within a board is making sure that the governance and the structure is one that really splits the workload equally, especially the emotional, like hidden labor of things, that gets spread evenly. But yeah, if you do that sort of research, you can just have the most rewarding time.
Brilliant. I'm so delighted that you've all got such positive takes on being a trustee, but also a real positive take on the connection between trustees and development teams, which is just so lovely to hear. So sadly, because I could chat to you all day, we are running out of time. So thank you so much, and I'm going to pass back over to Phoebe to finish the session.
Thanks, Ruth. Thanks, everybody. Yeah, that was a really brilliant discussion, and particularly that last section. At Achates, part of what I do is looking at recruitment often for boards and chairs and trustees. So this is absolutely something that I think about a lot. And your example there, Sarah, about 315 applications is incredible. And I think also, as you say, there are some areas and some types of organisation where that is just much easier, and you're not seeing anything like that for other smaller arts organisations in different parts of the country with different art forms. And people kind of do often come to us and find it a real challenge about how they find good people. And we've talked a lot today about how important that is, the right people, the right fit, especially the right chair. So I think, yeah, lots of good notes for me there from that conversation as well. So thank you all so much. And yeah, it just remains for me to say a little bit more about us at Achates. So as you might know, we offer a range of services, including how to work with boards to get the most out of your fundraising. And as I mentioned, our recruitment services also look at trustee and chair recruitment. Hopefully you've learned some valuable tips from our lovely panellists today. But if you would also like to discuss how we might be able to support you, or if you'd just like to have a conversation with a member of our team, please do just drop us a line. Our email is info@achates.org.uk. And just to note as well, our next Achates Live is going to be broadcast on Thursday, the 11th of December, and that is going to focus on a topic that I think is very much at the forefront of our minds at the moment, and that's the use of AI in fundraising. That's going to be a really fascinating discussion. We're going to have more details to follow on that soon, so please do keep an eye on your inbox for that. And it just remains for me to say thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you back with us again very soon, and bye for now.